to our CBS News congressional correspondent, Nancy Cordes. She's joining us on the telephone to just talk a little bit about this statement from the McCain family, Nancy. And, of course, we've just been looking back at Senator McCain's life and his career and his history. And as Anne-Marie has pointed out, this is not the end, but clearly the fact that the family has chosen to discontinue the treatment, we sort of want to just ensure that everybody understands what a prolific career this man has had.
Right. And, you know, if you talk to any senator on Capitol Hill, they will say that John McCain is a fighter's fighter. They never counted him out in this battle, and they knew that he clearly wanted to give it everything he had, and that it was very difficult for him to leave Washington at all and to go back to Arizona for treatment. He is someone who lives and breathes his job as a senator on Capitol Hill. It truly defines who he is. He loves to be here. And, you know, despite the fact that his family believed that he would get better treatment and be more comfortable if he went home to Arizona, as you just pointed out, Vlad, he came back to Washington multiple times because he just couldn't stay away from the Senate that he loved. And surely everyone around him was hoping that even though the chances are quite low that someone will survive this aggressive type of cancer, they believe that if anyone could do it, it would be him. So the fact that the family is announcing that he is ceasing medication, you know, it's a source of comfort because, of course, we know he will be more comfortable if he isn't taking aggressive treatment, and he can, you know, sort of get off of that regimen. But obviously, the message inherent in that is clear to senators on Capitol Hill, many of whom will cite John McCain as a reason that they got into politics in the first place. They can all tell you the first time that they met him, how he inspired them, how he encouraged them. So he truly is someone who they see not just as a colleague and a friend, but as an inspiration. And he's been sorely missed on Capitol Hill for the past few months.
Yeah, can we talk a little bit about his brand of conservatism and how it seems like at times how far we have moved from what he represents and the way he conducted himself as a politician?
Sure. You know, John McCain rose up in the Senate at a time when there was a lot of a street cred to being a moderate and a deal maker. The lions of the Senate were considered to be men and women who had strongly held beliefs, who battled hard for those beliefs, but who also believed in compromise and working together. And he was, for a long time, a very strong member of this pack of senators who were dubbed the Gang of 14, moderate Democrats and Republicans who would often come together to hash out deals when the more entrenched factions of their parties were not. And there was there was a lot of status that came along with that. And even more recently, within the past decade, you saw him stepping up and taking leadership on negotiations over the debt, over immigration, and these so-called gangs of six and gangs of eight. But we did see the status that goes along with being a moderate, being a maverick, as he was often called, wane. And a lot of those members who had taken a lot of pride in being in the Gang of 14 either left office or sort of realized that really wasn't where it was at any longer, that compromise had become something of a dirty word, particularly on the right. But John McCain is one of those senators who sort of never backed away from that, who still felt that there was value in working with the other side and was openly frustrated with the fact that he didn't necessarily get the backing from his party to do that the way that he once had.
You know, Nancy, one of the things that, and you've just been touching upon that, is, he made a series of what he used to call hard calls. I mean, he actually wrote a book about it, which is a fascinating book about decisions that leaders throughout the course of human history have had to make and what the difficulties and the challenges into making those decisions are. And, this idea, if you recall, back when Senator McCain was running against then Senator Barack Obama for the presidency of the United States, he was called a maverick, right? That was what the term around Senator McCain and the aura around him was. In other words, that he was willing to buck party trend. He was willing to buck, conventional wisdom in his own party if he thought it was the right thing. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody always agreed with him, if you were a Republican or if you were a Democrat, but he was willing to take those chances, and you don't see the style that John McCain exhibited in the Senate as much anymore.
Right, and I think that that's partly because of his longevity and his knowledge that he was never going to have trouble winning re-election in Arizona, where he is considered a native son and a hero, and so he had the freedom to take those stands. And, it's not to say that it didn't frustrate his party to no end at certain times, especially when some of his stands caught them off guard. Most recently and memorably when it came to the GOP's attempts to replace Obamacare with something else. And they were really sort of flailing, trying to come up with any plan, anything at all that could get 60 votes, and he unexpectedly came back to Washington and stood up and made that thumbs down and voted no, and really dashed their hopes. And this was a time that a lot of Republicans believed was a time for party unity, and that they had made this vow to replace Obamacare, and that they should all stand together and do it. John McCain said, hey, I believe in replacing Obamacare too, but this is 1/6 of our economy, and we're not just going to replace it with something that we came up with overnight just for the sake of saying we did it. We need to have a smarter plan. We need to do this via regular order, which means going through the committees and really coming up with tested legislation that has been vetted instead of slapping something together and calling it a day. And he certainly got pilloried on the right and hailed as a hero on the left. But there were many other times when he took a stand that disappointed Democrats as well. So he wasn't a moderate on all issues, but he was a moderate on issues that even when it was unpopular with his party, and caused no end of frustration with Republican leadership.
Yeah, I recall. My recollection is in a couple of instances teaming together with Senator Feingold for the McCain-Feingold bill, which the senator decried the injection of soft money into political campaigns. I also remember that he was only one of 2 senators to vote against President Bush's tax cut. He was, that was a real, and he did not have, I guess, because of some of those positions that he took, to the warmest of relations with President Bush. But this was a really big deal. This was something that the Republicans wanted to get done, and he decided to vote against it, saying that this tax plan that the president wanted to implement was going to benefit the richest Americans. And I'm sure that frustrated the Bush White House to no end.
Right, and it's been interesting to see him basically in recent years let go of some of these issues that he really cared about because he wasn't oblivious to the political reality that given the stance of the modern Republican Party, he was just not going to get anywhere. You just don't hear him talking about campaign finance anymore because he knows that he's not going to get anywhere with his party on that particular issue. Immigration, something that he felt so strongly about that he worked with Democrats and came up with the only immigration compromise bill to have passed the Senate in the past decade, in 2013. And then it went on to sort of crash up against the rocks in the House, and he really has not made a serious attempt to resurrect it ever since, because it's clear to him, just as clear as it is to everyone else, where the political winds are blowing, and so he chose to focus on issues where he really thought he could make some headway, to focus on defense, which is obviously something that is that's near and dear to him, armed services, foreign relations, those kinds of things. And he really did not slow down. I mean, this is someone who was still traveling the world up until very recently to hotspots to talk to world leaders, and that is how, frankly, he came to be one of the first people who was handed this dossier that was compiled by Christopher Steele, the British former MI6 agent who was looking into allegations about President Trump and Russia in the run-up to the election. He handed it over to the FBI, he said, because once he got a look at it, he felt that he was not the right person to investigate further, that this was something for law enforcement. But it just shows you, even after 2 failed bids for the presidency, decades in the House and then the Senate, that he was still someone who was sort of at the heartbeat of national politics until very recently.